The first breathing technique that I learned that really impacted me deeply is called pendulum breathing. I learned it in Systema, or what I sometimes call Systema, which I studied in Toronto, I studied it in Vancouver, and I studied it in Berlin with 3 different teachers. It's a cool martial art for a lot of reasons. One reason is that a lot of people don't understand it, so they say really weird things when they criticize it, which is always fun. I mean, there's nothing better than critics who have no idea what they're talking about, right? So it's cool because it has no forms, it has no katas, it has no bowing, it has no belts, and if you have a good teacher, the teacher is always the student is always the teacher, and you really have an amazing community. Now, I have had an experience here, there, and the other place, and I've looked at different cities and courses and just decided to skip them because the teacher obviously didn't share that mentality. But if you can find that person who has that attitude, it just can be amazing. All right, so there's the background. What is the pendulum breathing itself physically, and how can you apply it? Well, it is what it sounds like. It's swinging the breath backwards and forward, and like a pendulum goes this way and then it pauses and then it goes that way a little bit more and then it goes back and then it pauses, and like this sort of motion, you're going to breathe in and then you're going to breathe in a little bit more, and you're going to breathe out and you're going to breathe out a little bit more. So it's kind of weird to illustrate, but it's literally like this. Now, you don't have to do it that exaggeratedly, and if I demonstrate it the way I normally do it, you're not going to perceive anything. It's the imperceptible breathing technique. But while you're waiting in line to be examined, or you're waiting to have a visa stamped, or whatever you're doing at the border, etc., and you are nervous, you could just do this silently unto yourself. No one needs to know, and you'll be relaxing yourself, and it is so powerful. And it is wonderful to do while you're reading. It's wonderful to do before you start to use memory techniques. And it's wonderful to do as a kind of cool down at the end of the day when you're just laying in bed. Maybe you're in Shavasana, which is a yoga word for corpse pose, which basically just means laying on your back and not moving, hands at your side, not touching yourself. And you can just breathe in and you can breathe out, and you do this extra little breath in and breath out, and you can be using your memory palaces while you do it. So you're at station 1 in a memory palace. Maybe you've just memorized a new word. You bring in the breath, you bring it in a little bit more, you trigger off that word, breathe out a little bit more. Go to station 2 in your memory palace. Breathe in a little bit more, trigger the second word that you've memorized, breathe out, and just go through the memory palace that way. Let's say you got 10 station memory palace, you do that amount of times. Really, really powerful. By the way, if you're new here, this is Dr. Anthony Metivier from magneticmerrymethod.com. Hit that thumbs up, get subscribed. If you want to join our community, Better Living Through Better Memory. We have a lot of fun with this topic of memory, going as deep down the rabbit hole as possible. And breathwork is so huge. I wrote an entire portion of a book called The Victorious Mind, where I get into many, many variations on pendulum breathing, applying it to walking around and so forth. You can probably figure out what that is. You just walk and you breathe in a little bit more, keep walking, breathe out a little bit more. It's not rocket science at all, but if you want a written version, that's in The Victorious Mind. Now, there are 2 versions of the next breathwork exercise, which is called alternate nostril breathing or alternate psychic nostril breathing. So basically, the first one we're probably not going to do in public very often. And, there's different hand movements involved in this. I don't really get all fancy about it. But if I'm using my hand, it's basically closing off one nostril, breathing in, then closing off the other one, and breathing out like this. Oh, that sounds gross. But the psychic version is just pretending. So you're breathing in through one nostril, pretending, and then you're breathing out the other one, pretending. And it actually can feel like it's really, really happening. And it's so calming, it's so relaxing. And these are the kinds of things that I do before giving a TEDx talk, for example. I seem very focused and calm and collected, but from the minute that I woke up that day, I was starting to do both pendulum breathing, psychic nostril breathing, alternating between the nostrils mentally, and it just creates so much calm focus. It's wonderful. And I also did this while I was memorizing the talk itself, because it just gives this level of focus and amazing concentration, and it just makes everything fun, probably because you have more oxygen in your brain. Now this one's for the memorizers, people using memory techniques, or people who want to be using memory techniques, but maybe you're struggling with your memory palaces. You're having a hard time wrapping your mind around how you're going to get, I don't know, Super Mario or someone like that to move from station to station in your memory palace, or even just to do something on one station. Here's a little exercise that you can do that will link your memory palace work together with your breath work so that you can get better results out of both at the same time. Imagine that you are Super Mario and you're in station 1 of your memory palace. Let's say this is station 1, Super Mario is right here, but you are Super Mario. Now, let's say that the word that you're trying to remember is superlative. For whatever reason, you have to memorize that word. You're going to have Super Mario. He's going to have the Superman symbol on his chest, and he's going to be, pointing to his lats or doing some sort of lat workout to help you remember that it's superlative, right? And so he's doing a lat workout, and you're going to breathe as if you were him, and you're going to imagine him breathing, and you're going to do the breathing work that we just talked about. So you're going to have him do pendulum breathing, and you can have it as exaggerated as you want while he's working his lats, which is pumping out the S sign on his Super Mario shirt because he's like Superman with super lats. And you're going to go... You're doing it literally yourself, and you're having your figure do that. Imagine that with me together. And literally Super Mario's lats are just booming. Or you can just imagine Super Mario getting his mustache all, maybe a little bit wet and moist from going like this kind of stuff. And he's also trying to do a lat workout while he's doing that, superlative. And this is going to help make everything so much sharper in your mind. And it's going to give you this feeling because you're having the oxygen reach you. And then you can imagine Super Mario having that feeling, which is going to increase your imaginative associative skills. And then you can just repeat that with every character in your list. So you could go and have Adam West as Batman, breathing. You can go and have Christian Bale breathing, and he can be in a Batman suit or not in a Batman suit. You can have Cookie Monster, Dracula, Einstein, Michel Foucault, Grover from Sesame Street. On and on and on and on, and you can just repeat this again and again and again and get so much breathwork practice for yourself, but familiarize yourself with each and every character because you spent some time breathing with them. They say to understand another person, you should walk a mile in their shoes. I say walk a mile in their lungs. Now, before anyone says, Anthony, you haven't talked about breath withholding. Breath withholding is something that you probably want to run past a doctor first. I do it, and it has interesting effects. And the whole Wim Hof thing, people treat this as if he somehow invented this. No, this is quite old, as is cold treatment. I was doing cold treatment long before I ever heard of Wim Hof. I learned it from Systema, and in Systema it was talked about as just dropping a cold bucket of water over your head twice a day, in the morning and in the evening. And if you had access to water, you would go into a cold pond and, muck around and so forth. And then the breath withholding there's a variety of breath holding, one of which is doing push-ups while you are holding your breath. And there's various patterns and all of that kind of stuff. It is something that really you should see a doctor about before you're doing, or whoever that you trust, but ideally a medical professional. And in terms of specific tips around breath holding and memory, I don't really have any. And one of the reasons why is because you're probably going to have something, I guess it's called hypoxia, and you're just not going to be thinking necessarily about your memory techniques in the same way that these oxygen enriching exercises are going to do. And you can have arguments about, well, breath withholding actually enriches you just as well, and yada, yada, yada. And, that can all be true, and happy to chat about those things or read comments about that if you care to leave them. But at the end of the day, I think breath withholding is a much more meditative practice, and it is one that, for me anyway, is just not really associated with memory. The way that I'll do it is either before or after, but typically after I have sat in meditation and recited the Sanskrit. And when I'm reciting the Sanskrit, I'm just downright chanting this stuff. So it's, just like Chittameva Mahadosham, Chittameva Hi Balakaha, Chittameva Mahatmayam, Chittameva Mahanasa, Chittameva Hi Mithya Atma. And that already is a kind of breath withholding, because if I do a very long chain of recitation, I'm not breathing in, I'm just breathing out. So it's not really breath withholding, but it's still a retention of one while focusing on the other. And it's not intake, it's mostly just outtake. And if you do work with memorized mantras or any material, even just memorizing songs or poems, you can certainly experiment with extending the length of recitation, like entire poems, and just see if you can do the whole thing without inhaling as a kind of breath withholding exercise. Filled with mingled cream and amber, I will raise this glass again. Such hilarious visions clamber through the chambers of my brain. Quaintest thoughts and queerest fancies come to life and fade away. What care I how time passes? I am drinking ale today. I had one little inhale there. Whew, that's a lot. And it's a very short poem. And to do it all on an exhale, it's not breath withholding, but it is another exercise that you can try. And, again, breath withholding, I'm not really the person to advise on it, even though that I do it. I talked about it in The Victorious Mind, and I just generally don't link it to memory. And if anything, I have my own personal concern that it might be damaging my brain a little bit through hypoxia and not necessarily helping with memory. So a lot of caveats around that. Anyway, if you are interested in more of these topics, more things that I have to say about breathing, hit that thumbs up. Make sure you're subscribed if you're not already. And there is an audio excerpt from the book that I was talking about, The Victorious Mind. You can go ahead and watch that video next and listen to the introduction and see what you think. And if you find that you might be interested in that book, great. If not, thanks for checking it out. Thanks for being part of this, and go out there and breathe. And one last little tip around breathing. Just try as much as you can to remind yourself of your breath throughout the day. And there's no special memory technique for this necessarily, but what you can do is turn your world into a kind of memory palace. And you could have a poster on the wall that says breathe. You could have a card on your computer monitor that says breathe. You could get some books that say breathe and pass them on the bookshelf. There's all kinds of ways that you can modify your environment that bring back this message. You could order, these days it's so easy to order your own t-shirt designs and just get one that says breathe and put that on there. And then every time you walk past the mirror, actually stop yourself and do this. Breathe. And it is so powerful. And another little thing that comes to mind before we go is Kirtan Kriya, which is a little exercise where you go sa ta nama, and you could actually play around with the breath. You go sa ta na ma. There. So I just made that up spontaneously. I'm going to go play with it. Thank you again for watching this, and check out that Victorious Mind extract next.